Welcome to another episode of New Normal Now. I'm Giovanni Mujayas, joined by my co-host, Hannah Khan. Hannah, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Gio. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good too. I'm in a musical kind of mode actually today, which we'll probably get to later. But
yes, I'm very excited for today's episode. It's all about creativity in the new normal. Now, I know that I've spoken to many people who have felt pressure in quarantine to stay creative. I know that I have to some extent. At the beginning of quarantine, I was in grad school, so I was actually able to stay pretty productive. But once I graduated, I just lost all motivation. I struggled to even write a bio. It took me a month. I just felt stuck. Can you relate to that at all, Gio?
Yeah, I mean, I am a visual journalist, right? So like what I do is naturally creative in some way. And I feel like when we have coronavirus, the thing that matters most is getting the news out. And not as much creativity comes with breaking news usually. So for me, it's been hard because being at home, you would think more time on your hands, more time to be creative. But for whatever reason, this quarantine funk has made it incredibly difficult, I think, to be creative in some ways. But I think a lot of that also has to do with what my mentor in the industry calls your quarantine ego.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I think being a perfectionist, right, and wanting to be the best at what you do makes it so if you have suboptimal conditions to create content, you're like, oh, well, do I really want to do this when it's only going to be 75% of what it would be normally, or it's not going to be up to my expectations, so do I want to show it to the world? And I think that's a real problem because at the end of the day, if anything about social media has taught us over this time, is that at the end of the day, it is the content that matters and not so much necessarily all the bells and whistles of the production around it. So checking my quarantine ego was ultimately helping to create this podcast, which I'm so happy we're now talking about it a couple episodes in.
Look, I'm so happy too. And I'm a perfectionist. You know that. I'm grateful that you brought me along because this for me is an opportunity for growth. This forum is new to me and I'm growing along with it. And I have to check my quarantine ego too and not, be so hard on myself when what I deliver in terms of content and production is maybe not perfect or the best, but it's good enough for where we are right now. I mean, I think it's also important to remember that we're all under so much stress. We're not going to be functioning like we normally do, and that's okay. We have to be easier on ourselves.
I agree. And we're all in it together, right? Like this is the one thing that really unites everyone right now is some degree of like staying at home and not having all the resources at your disposal to do things. So I think in a way it's forced people to be more creative because you have less and have to do more in some ways. So, yeah.
So some people for sure. I mean, some people I know, because I've felt both. Some days I feel like I can tackle a new project. Actually, I'm wearing this shirt because one of the things I've done in quarantine is tie-dyeing. That has been an artistic outlet for me. But yeah, there's some days when I just can't do anything but watch TV. And that is okay.
But that's good, right? Yeah. I mean, I think engaging with pop culture and sort of seeing yourself through the things that you consume is an emotional, it's an important emotional experience because it reminds you that you're not alone, that there are things that you want to do after quarantine, that there are people that you look up to, that you want to be more like. So consuming media isn't necessarily a bad thing. This whole idea of passive consumption, you don't have to consume passively. You can be seeing yourself or seeing other things around the world in the things you consume and making active choices and decisions based on that consumption in your real life. Sorry, I had to drop a little philosophical meta talk there.
That was a positive spin. I appreciated that. I mean, also, I just think sometimes it's good to give your brain a rest. You can't always be producing and creating. Sometimes you just need to take some time off.
Yeah, and speaking of producing and creating, right? Like when we look at various industries that are in the creative space, particularly theater, I'm thinking of. Like quarantine has hit theater and Broadway very hard.
It has, and I feel for the theater community. They're my people. I used to be an actor, as we discussed last episode. And it is a very, very difficult time for artists, not just theater artists, of course, the film and television industry has been hit as well, but theater artists right now are suffering because Broadway, as an example, has been shut down since March 12th, and most, if not all, theater productions have also been shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic. Broadway had 31 shows in production at the time, and 3 so far have already just permanently closed because, there is no set time for Broadway to reopen. This is the longest shutdown in history, which is crazy.
Wow.
And it was just recently announced that Broadway will be closed the rest of the year, and we're not really sure when it's going to open again. Hopefully next winter or spring, but there's just so many factors that go into it.
Yeah, and one thing though that I'm happy about the new normal and quarantine at large is it's really allowed us to find ways to connect with that side of the arts through streams, stream programming and streaming services. So for me, I recently watched Hamilton on Disney Plus. It was my first time watching or consuming Hamilton in any form, which is great. I was actually scheduled to go to the LA tour this past year, or would it still be going? I'm not sure, but I was going to go, I think, back in May, and then this thing happened, and obviously wasn't able to go see it live, which is super unfortunate because everyone saw it, and I'm so mad because I wanted to see it live too, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
But I think the film version on Disney Plus was terrific because as someone who only listened to the music and saw the bits and pieces through, advertising and whatever, it was incredible. What an incredible story. What an incredible arrangement. It was just great.
I mean, Hamilton is a cultural phenomenon. It is revolutionary in the world of theater.
No pun intended.
Revolution. No, it really is. And I think it's pretty special that we get to witness the original cast. This will be documented forever on film. I never saw the original cast. I was lucky enough to see it on Broadway in 2017. But,
amazing.
There is that magic of having the original cast together. And I think that they did such a fantastic job. They shot it over multiple performances. And I thought the way that they edited it together made you really feel like you were there. You were in the room where it happens.
Yeah, I mean, and I would have never known that they shot it off of multiple performances, right? Like, it was so seamlessly done. And I love that intermission was 1 minute. I thought that was hilarious. Like, I was like, wait, no, I need to grab popcorn. I need to grab something else. Like, I need more than a minute.
I think they did such a fantastic job with it. And I'm glad that so many people like you who have never gotten to experience it, got to experience it. And for, I think, the theater community, it was a gift because it's never going to feel the way it feels when you're really in an audience and you get to experience live theater, but it was the next best thing. And so I am so excited because today we have a very special guest. He was a vocal editing consultant on the film of Hamilton. So cool. But also he is the current music director of Hamilton on Broadway. And he's also my very good friend, Ian Weinberger. Ian is one of the most talented people I know, but he's also one of the kindest people I know. And his credits include The Book of Mormon and Kinky Boots on Broadway. He's worked on the cast albums of Peter Pan Live, The Sound of Music Live, and so many other productions. I'm so proud to be his friend, and I'm so happy to have him here with us now, Ian Weinberger.
Hey.
Hello. Nice to be with you all, and thank you for the amazing intro.
Oh, you are so welcome. We really are thrilled to have you here. And Gio, you should know that Ian and I go all the way back to Northwestern University.
Wow.
All the way back.
Yes, we met backstage during a rehearsal for Sweeney Todd.
400,000 years ago. And
oh my goodness.
That was your freshman year?
That was my freshman year. Your senior year?
My senior year.
Your senior year.
And I was in Overboard trying to music direct Sweeney Todd. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. up to that point.
You know, before we brought you on, Ian, we were talking a little bit about Hamilton. So I'm curious, like, how are you feeling now with Hamilton on the TV or the big screen or the small screen or the phone, however people want to look at it now? How do you feel?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's kind of surreal, honestly, to know that, as you know, I hadn't quite considered the phone yet, but you're absolutely right when you mention it, that any old person could just be, you know, grocery shopping and watching the show while they wait in line on their device. It's very odd to me, and exciting. But I remember last week or week and a half ago, right on the eve of the release, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to the Friday night, I remember sort of saying to a colleague of mine on the show, being like, wow, it's just about to be out there for whoever wants it. It's an odd feeling, but it's very exciting. It's at the same time, it's very thrilling to see the show re-enter the conversation online. I'm thrilled that people are so excited about it. I'm thrilled that so many people, and especially families that are together at the moment, are getting to watch it, and people like you, Gio, that never had the chance to see it live on stage yet, finally have the chance to do so from the comfort of their own living rooms. It is really very exciting, and it feels like the right time for the release. It feels like the right moment while we're all stuck at home, and while it's not competing for the attention of live theaters, since there are no live theaters at this moment. It feels right. And it has given me a lot of a resurgence of excitement about working on the show, which has been really, really fun.
Daveed Diggs, who is the original Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson in Hamilton, has said that he wasn't always comfortable with the singing in the show, but he of course went on to win a Tony. So Ian, what have you learned from watching him overcome that insecurity?
You know, it's so funny. I would never have known that about him had you not told me, or had he not said so publicly. He's because he doesn't look it, right? He doesn't appear that inhibited whatsoever. He so embodies that character and that confidence. And I think Daveed has taught me that, you know, those kinds of performance insecurities that I for sure have as a performer, and I know many of my friends do, in theater or out. But I think, you know, there's, at the risk of diminishing it too much or making it too simple, there's something to really be said for fake it till you make it, and something really to be said for nobody has to know that you have those insecurities unless you admit it, if you mask them well enough. And there's something to be said that, you know, if I saw him do the show that many times and really was in the dark that he was so terrified of it, that really says a lot, because he wasn't going around backstage being like, I'm so out of water, the way that I myself have so many times in my own situation. So that's a good life lesson for me.
The stream musicals, I think, could arguably make theater more mainstream, or at the very least expose a ton of new people to it. So do you see a future where they get more attention, both in terms of buzz and resources, than the actual live stage performances themselves?
That's interesting. I mean, that's a very good question. I don't know that I'm in any position to make a really big prediction that holds any water, but I think your point is a good one, that certainly for now, we're in a time and a situation where we don't have the ability to go to the theater, at least not for some time. And so this streaming theater and live stream theater and theater that is built specifically for streaming platforms have the ball right now. They have the momentum. And, you know, I think, to your question, there is definitely an argument that those media can certainly drum up some interest and can certainly bring theater to the folks that may never have the chance to find it on their own, even you know, places in remote parts of the country and the world where there just isn't a large theater ecosystem. That would be excellent if we can find a theater fan in the middle of rural North Dakota. That would be really exciting. It is hard for me to imagine that the attention shifts entirely and permanently from making live theater to making theater for a streaming platform or a video platform. The whole exercise is predicated on all of the audience arriving in the theater and experiencing it together at the same time. I think that is what separates it from every other art form, is the idea that it is meant to be experienced as one at one time and then never repeated exactly again. I think certainly the Hamilton film is a great example of something that it translates really, really well to a film medium, but is not the real thing. It's really, really close, but is not and I'm really proud of it, and I think it represents the show really well. But is not the same as walking into the Richard Rodgers Theater and sitting with 1,300 people you don't know and laughing at the same lines and applauding for the same things and crying for the same things. It's not. So I think that experience is irreplaceable.
Disney's release of Hamilton comes at an interesting time in and of itself within quarantine, because not just because of the quarantine, but because, when we as a country now are re-examining our own history and the notable figures within it. So what do you think the film contributes to that conversation at this time?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. This is a good question. And I think I don't pretend to be any kind of expert on this discussion whatsoever, but here's my potentially lame answer, which is that I think what the show has always done really well, and what by that I especially mean what Lin has always done really well in his writing of the show, was that the piece makes clear, or at the very least shines a light on, the fact that and this isn't my idea. I've heard him say this in many interviews, so I'm just stealing from him. But the fact that the major issues that we have been dealing with as a country recently are the same issues that we have always been dealing with as a country. That these discussions are not new. They're a different maybe flavor or a different angle on the same discussion, but they have basically been the same discussions since the founding. It hit Disney Plus, I think, at exactly the right time, Gio, that it came after we all realized, oh my gosh, we have so much work to do. And we have so many changes to be made.
Yeah.
And, I think Lin would tell you that one of the theses of the play is, what do you do with your short time on the planet? And how do you make the world better? And we all feel that much differently now when we know that there is so much building to be done.
Ian, you've been working on Hamilton for 5 years. And I know that the show has inspired, it's educated, it's moved people. How has it made an impact on your life?
Oof, immeasurably. Hamilton changed my life. That's not overblown. That's not BS. It's really true. It not only has it turned out to be this unbelievable gig, and I think in the most benign of ways, it changed my life in that I don't have to explain the show I'm working on. I've often joked that usually I have to say something like, yeah, I'm doing this thing and it's written by this person. Oh, well, they wrote this as well. But now I can sort of just say, oh, I work on Hamilton, and people know what that is. But it changed my life because it has, given me such faith in the future of the industry and the medium. And it's a once in a lifetime piece to work on, because not only is it endlessly challenging artistically, and not only does it have a lot of artistic merit and artistic weight, and there's so much to mine from it, and I believe in it so much, but is also just so enjoyable, and I happen to love it on a personal level. Not only are those things all true, but it also has had this enormous resonance with the world writ large outside of our nerdy theater community, which maybe hasn't happened since maybe Rent, but probably A Chorus Line, and maybe before that.
Yeah.
And not only are all of those things true, but it's a group of people that I love and love to work with and love to come to work with. And that's a jackpot of a series of circumstances. It's a really dream job. I'm really lucky to be there.
I love that. I
I
love that so
know.
much.
And this is a very difficult time for the theater community with
Oof.
Broadway not opening again until at least 2021. Clearly this affects you since you're the music director of Hamilton on Broadway, but how has it been coping with all of this uncertainty?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to what you were saying, the two of you, at the beginning of the discussion before I joined you, and I think all of that resonates very, very heavily with me. I think we have been on such a journey, the collective we, not just the Broadway community, but all of us, as we've learned to understand more of what we're dealing with this virus, and the way it plays out in our nation. I think it's so funny. I'm smiling because when we shut down on March 12th, we were told the best information we had at the time was that we were shutting down for 4 weeks. And that was a very manageable thing. I was joking to the cast members at the time, like, don't forget the show, keep reviewing. We'll come back and we'll get ourselves together. But it's tough. Now there's a reality that tells us, okay, now we know we're not coming back for a very long time. It could be the top of 21. It could be much later than that. It could be a year from now. And I worry for our industry. I really do. Broadway is an enormous industry and an enormously important piece of the New York economy. And not just the shows themselves. When you think about tourism and the hotels near the theater and the restaurants near the theater, it's a majorly important piece of the New York tourist ecosystem. But then, of course, when you think beyond Broadway, when you think about national tours, regional theaters, community theaters, we are a social species. Not to get too heady about it, but we are. We are built to socialize and be together in a group. And it's going to be a long time, I feel, before that is a societally acceptable thing to do without thinking twice about it. Think about pre-2020. You would buy tickets to a show or a concert or, a lecture. I haven't gone to that many lectures, but that's because I'm not very smart. And you would just do that and show up and not think about it, right? You go to a cocktail party or you go to a friend's birthday party and you just do that and don't think twice about it. And we're not in a place where we'll be able to do that. And I think it'll be a long time before the royal you can just show up to a room full of people and not have to think about that. And so
that's true.
I'm really concerned about our theater community. I think it's going to be a very long time before we are back to any semblance of what feels like normal in terms of how our industry behaves and how we're used to getting jobs and how we're used to going from show to show. It was a long roundabout answer.
No, that was very helpful. Do you imagine that people will be spread out in the theater, maybe every few seats, or how's that going to work?
That's tough. Luckily, it is not my job to decide those things. I think if you're talking about Broadway, it's really tough to do something like that because Broadway as it is such a really tricky economic model. There was ideas floating around about what if it was every other seat or every sixth seat or every third row and there's 2 rows between or something like that. The problem with that is that the theaters need to be full or close to full in order to make any money. So it's not really worth it. Right. It's not really worth it for a producer to put on a show where the theater is 40% full. In fact, it's not at all worth it. Think about all of the things that happen when you go see a play. Probably you're not going to be handed a program anymore, or at least not for a while. But even think about if you imagine the backstage area, especially on Broadway, these old theaters, there's very little backstage space. Everybody's really close together. In the orchestra pit, please, we're all together in this dark space. And we don't have this at Hamilton, but if you have a woodwind or a brass section and you've got trombone players like blowing out their spit valves on top of each other, that's a thing that happens. All these dressing rooms are really close together and people are packed in tightly in their dressing stations. Not to mention, you've got shows where, I'm about to sneeze, this could be fun. You've got shows where people hand each other props as part of the scene. You've seen that in Hamilton by now. Half the props in the show are paper and people handing letters to each other. Then you have people making out on stage. How are you going to deal with that?
Talk about that.
It's not to mention dance shows where people lift each other or partner in some way. So much has to happen in terms of people being in contact without even dealing with getting an audience in there and sitting near to each other. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
that starts to be like, do you only do 1 and 2 person shows for a while? Maybe. That's interesting.
Bonkers. What would you just say to all the college students and recent grads out there, who want to be involved in Broadway, perhaps on the music side as well, but aren't sure exactly what the path looks like in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah. I think this is tough because the pandemic obviously has changed this question enormously. I think under normal circumstances, I would say to those people that the best way to get involved perhaps with the Broadway scene is to come to New York and just meet people and reach out to as many of us as you can. If you're interested in music, especially, you would reach out to other musicians or music directors via social media or by stalking them at the theater even, or whatever. Maybe don't do that. But our business thrives on word of mouth and on just making connections with each other. And one of the things that I know we deeply need to do is to spread the literal wealth in terms of making Broadway music, especially, much less of a white heavy world. And so we're so eager to meet all sorts of people from all over the spectrum of backgrounds. But what's infuriating is that the pandemic has made all of this sort of moot while none of us know how the industry is going to function on the other side of it. I think what I would say to those people is, I want to know all of you. I think we all, the royal we, want to know all of you and want to get to meet all of you and work with you. But no one knows what kind of opportunities are going to be available and at what pace. I think I've said this many, many times. What I'm most scared about, and again, I'm in a really lucky place because I know I have a thing to go back to when this is over, which is amazing. For so many people, we're going to start doing shows again someday, and we're going to start preparing for shows and doing our production meetings and doing casting and building production teams the way we always do. But the difference is that everyone's going to be looking for work at the same time. And that has, as far as I'm aware, never ever happened because things are cyclical and people have one job and then they don't. And, we've never had an opportunity where most of the workforce is in need of a project. And so I think it will be some time before things are back to like having a flow where people are able to sort of pop from project to project. That sounds, I'm certain, enormously discouraging to those people that you describe. And yeah. I think the best thing for those people to do is you sort of get like bonus free college time in terms of like developing the skills and getting good at the things that you didn't have time to do in college. I ignored most of the things I was supposed to be doing in college. Hannah knows this about me, but I finished college and I was still a terrible sight reader. And if I was sitting at home and was able to like motivate myself enough to get better at sight reading, knowing that I've got some free time baked in now, that might be worth doing. But I feel like once there starts to be a momentum to our industry, I would still say to all those people, let us know that you exist, say hello, introduce yourselves, and we'll all sort of be figuring this out very much together. I think the Broadway industry that we left is going to not necessarily look like the Broadway industry that we come back to.
Yes.
And what that means is that there's an opportunity for us to create something hopefully different and better and more equitable and more reflective of the world around us. That would make me very happy.
I love that, Ian. I mean, look, the career of a theater artist has always been unpredictable. So now I think for those graduates and people entering the field, you have an opportunity to really flex those muscles of grit and persistence that will help you throughout your career. And Ian, you're also talking about, taking this time to develop some of your skills. One thing that you've done in quarantine that I love, put out to the world your Saturday Night on Broadway videos.
Yeah.
I don't know how to stay home for this. In my mind, I'm trying to go. But my ham fam knows best, and they'll all say, no! Stay home for this. 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 Saturday night on Broadway. Stay at home.
So, what advice do you have for people who are struggling to stay creative in quarantine?
I identify with those people. I feel the same, and it's thank you for talking about the Saturday Night Broadway videos. Those have been really fun to do, and we're on a bit of a summer hiatus now. My buddy Kurt and I have been making them, and we sort of like finished on a week ago with July 4th with what we were calling the season finale, and those were fun because we felt a self-imposed need, to be fair, but a need to come up with something every Saturday. And that was a fun, just self-inflicted reason to do anything with no professional ramifications, with no need to really work under the guidelines of any other creative partners. And knowing that it was pretty low stakes. These were mostly just going out to our Broadway family and then sometimes posted on the internet for fun. But, it's not like we're trying to make a show that is going to make sense. It's not like we have to figure out how to tell a story in a coherent way. So the low stakes things helped. And it was nice to just have our own small little weekly deadline to do. But even that started to get a little bit feeling like a lot after a while, even those little stupid videos that we were doing. So, I think there came a time when, as you described earlier at the beginning, the recognition that, I don't think it's the worst thing if we allow ourselves a little break. Yeah. And let ourselves just hang with our families and spend time on other things and let our brains recharge a little bit, because when this first started, I have a number of friends in March who were thinking so much about, well, this is the new normal and we have to figure out how to make content every week and how to figure out how to make a musical over Zoom. Okay, how do we do that? And working so hard. No, with the feeling that our shows need to stay relevant. Our projects need to stay in the conversation so that in 4 weeks we can come back and it's like nothing ever happened. Now realizing that it's going to be more like 14 to 20 months at least, you know what I mean, instead of 4 weeks. And so I think we all sort of have allowed ourselves the permission to be like, okay, we don't need to try to do Broadway on Zoom. That's like not a thing. So there's been a collective, I think, permission of letting ourselves work on things if we want to, which goes entirely against the ethos of the sort of hustle and nose to the grindstone thing that so many of us in theater are used to. The idea that working on 4 projects at the same time is not enough, and we are used to hustling, and that's odd for me and odd for many of us, but I think ultimately we'll be very healthy once we realize that it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect note to end on, Ian. Thank you
I'm
much.
glad. You're so welcome.
For imparting your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And I guess there's one thing we learned, if nobody learned anything else from any of this conversation, is no Zoom way. We like Broadway. We don't need Zoom way.
That's right. No Zoom
Okay.
way. I'm thrilled to have been with you all. Thank you for the good questions, and I'm thrilled that you love the movie so much. It makes me really happy.
Yes, so much so. Thanks again, Ian. We really appreciate it.
You're the
My
best.
pleasure.
It's great to see you, Ian. Miss you.
Great to see you.
Bye. Wow, that conversation with Ian was really awesome. He's so brilliant.
He really is, isn't he's the best. He's so humble. I mean, this is the guy who started as a rehearsal pianist for Hamilton, and now he's the music director, which is such a distinguished position. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, he's a great human being. Can we just say that? He's just a good guy, and I'm so glad he got to share his story on our podcast, and just talk a little bit about how creativity in the new normal is changing every day, and also, what's the fate of Broadway, and what will Broadway look like in the next year?
And he said himself, he doesn't know. We don't know.
We don't.
We're all kind of figuring it out as we go along. But one thing that he said, which I think both of us really needed to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching can relate to, is the idea of just taking some time to let your brain recharge. You don't always need to be putting out content and staying creative and productive. We were saying that at the beginning, but it was really nice to hear someone like him who's so successful say it as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't recharge your creative batteries, how are you supposed to be the best at what you do? You need that time to mentally kind of take a beat and keep calm and carry on, as the saying goes.
I love that.
One thing I hope our viewers or listeners out there are seeing too is, we're in your spot. We're in our rooms, or I'm in my childhood room right now. Things are changing. This is new for us, and a lot of the things that are happening in your life are new too to you, maybe for the first time that you've ever experienced this kind of thing. So, we're all in it together, and that's what I love about doing the show with you, Hannah. I think it's great. We're getting to discuss it and sort of.
True. You're not alone. We are not alone. And we are here as a community, New Normal Now. We would love for you guys to be part of our family. So please subscribe to our channel so you can keep up with all of our episodes, and follow us at New Normal Now Podcast on Instagram. We'll be posting updates there as well.
Yes, and if you don't see us on Instagram, you can obviously find us on Instagram, our individual accounts, which you see on the screen. We're happy to hear from you in that way too. And yeah, keep the conversation going. We want to know everything that's going on in your new normal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode, and we will see you next time.
Bye.